This is Earl Nightingale. In this recording, the magic word is the first of 12 you'll receive in this series titled, How You Can Lead the Field in the Modern World. Before we start, let's get a few things straight. I'm not going to try to tell you how to live your life. That's none of my business, nor is it anybody else's business. That's your business. Nor is this series a collection of pleasantries, platitudes, or Pollyanna. It is a summation of more than 20 years of research on one subject, and that is, why do some people do so well in life, while so many more do not? And the first thing let's talk about is the magic word. The experts call it the most important word as far as the results we get from life are concerned, in this or any other language, and the word is attitude. It is our attitude toward life which will determine life's attitude toward us. Let's face the fact honestly that we shape our own lives, and the shapes of them will be determined by our attitudes. A person with a poor attitude toward learning, for example, isn't going to learn much until he changes his attitude. If we take the attitude that we cannot do something, we generally will not do it. An attitude of failure, and we're whipped before we start. So we know then that what we receive from life, what we accomplish or fail to accomplish, is due in large measure to our overall attitude. William James of Harvard University put it this way. He said, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. And isn't it wonderful that we have this measure of control?" Before we start talking about our attitude toward the world, let's talk about our attitude toward ourselves, since it's the attitude we take toward ourselves which determines our attitude toward the world. Now right here we come to a rather strange fact. We're so familiar with ourselves, we tend to take ourselves for granted. We tend to minimize the things we can accomplish, the goals we can reach, and for some equally strange reason, believe others can accomplish things in our field which we cannot. There are literally millions of human beings living narrow, darkened, frustrated lives, living defensively, simply because they take a defensive, doubtful attitude toward themselves, and as a result, toward life in general. Attitude is a reflection, a result of a person's will. It is incalculably powerful. It can bring about marvelous results for us, but we need to train it, patiently, day by day. Now let's talk about the attitudes of people who are successful. The top 5% of the people who go sailing through life from one success to another, and who, even when they fail at something, shrug it off and head right out again. No matter who the person is or what he does, men and women in sales, business executives, people in all the professions, wives and mothers, students, top people in the armed forces, public servants, men and women in the service of religion, working men and women in all fields of endeavor. Wherever you find a person doing an outstanding job and getting outstanding results, you will find a person with the right kind of attitude. These people take the attitude toward themselves that they can accomplish what they set out to accomplish, that there's no good reason on earth why they can't be competent, successful. They have a healthy attitude toward themselves, and as a result, toward life and the things they want to accomplish. And because of this, they achieve some remarkable things, and come to be called successful, outstanding, brilliant, lucky, and a lot of other things. They are quite frequently no more brilliant or outstanding than the majority of the people by whom they're surrounded. But they did develop the right attitude, and they found their accomplishments not too difficult, and many times surprisingly easy, simply because it seems that so few are really trying, really believe in themselves. Successful people come in all shapes and sizes, and in widely varying degrees of intelligence, background, and so on. But they all have one thing in common. They expect more good out of life than bad. They expect to succeed more than they fail. If you want something worthwhile, take the attitude that there are a lot more reasons why you can have it than there are that you cannot, and set out to earn it. Go after it, work at it, ask for it, and 9 times out of 10, you'll get it. Our environment is really a mirror of our mental attitude. If we don't like our environment, we have to change our attitude first. Now, the world plays no favorites. It's impersonal. It doesn't care whether we change or not. Adopting a good, healthy attitude toward life doesn't affect the world and the people in it nearly as much as it affects us. It would be impossible to even estimate the number of jobs which have been lost, the number of promotions missed, the number of sales not made, the number of marriages ruined by poor attitudes. but you can number in the millions the jobs which are held but hated, the marriages which are tolerated but unhappy, all because of people who are waiting for the world and others to change toward them, instead of being big enough and wise enough to at least make a test which will prove beyond any shadow of a doubt where most, or at least a big part, of the trouble lies. Studies made of the lives of literally thousands of successful people have shown that they radiate confidence, assurance. They expect success, and they get success. You can spot these people by the way they walk, by the way they look and act. You can feel it about them when they enter a room. They may be short and fat, or tall and thin, or any combination in between, but they have about them the attitude of success. In the record Greener Pastures, I'll get into this next statement, but right now I want you to realize, if you don't already, that in 5 years or less, you can get to the top of the work you're now doing. I know this, but the important question here is, do you know this? The minute you do know it, you'll have this right attitude I'm talking about. The easiest and most effective means of forming a good attitude habit is to begin to act as though you have a good, positive, expectant attitude toward life. That's right. Begin right now to walk, act, and look as though you belong in this group. If you're already in the top 5%, you'll know what I mean. If you've never tried it, you'll be amazed at what happens. Actions trigger feelings, just as feelings trigger actions. Now, on the other side of this record, let me tell you of a little test you can make which will prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that a good attitude can change a person's life as dramatically as walking from a darkened room into the bright, clear light of day. Not long ago, I read a line which went, "Life is dull only to dull people." This is true, but it also could have read, "Life is interesting only to interesting people," or "Life is successful only to successful people." What I'm trying to say is that you must first become, mentally, from an attitude standpoint, that which you wish to achieve. A famous restaurateur was being interviewed by a reporter who asked, "When did you become successful?" And he replied, "I was successful when I was sleeping on park benches, because I knew what I wanted to do and that I would do it." In short, his attitude had been one of success, of expecting success, long before the material, the tangible rewards of success had been earned. We'll get into this particular phase of Lead the Field in record number 3, A Worthy Destination. But for now, remember that a person must act, look, and because of these things, feel successful before the success he seeks can come. The chances are you know people who seem to be what other people call lucky. All kinds of good and wonderful things seem to happen to them, and they give the impression of happily sailing through life, having a wonderful time, and getting more accomplished in a year than most people do in 5. This has been figured out fairly scientifically, and if anyone will conscientiously go about the test I'm going to recommend and stay with it every day for the next 30 days without fail, that person can join this small, happy, and extremely productive group of people. He'll find himself becoming lucky, as they say, and most of his problems will pretty well take care of themselves. Of this you can be sure. The results will be nothing short of amazing. It makes no difference how good a person's attitude has been in the past. Anything can be improved upon, and it's the small refinements upon something already good that makes it great. So here's the test. For the next 30 days, act toward the world, everything and everyone with whom you come in contact, with the attitude which represents the kind of results you want to achieve. That is, if the result you want is more success in what you're doing, act as though you are already in possession of the success you seek. If you want others to treat you with admiration and respect, treat others with admiration and respect first. Have you ever stopped to think of this? Every human being on earth is the most important human being on earth as far as he or she is concerned. You may never get anyone to admit it, but it's a proved scientific fact. So for the next 30 days, treat every person with whom you come in contact as the most important person on earth, remembering as you do that as far as that person is concerned, he is. Now, the reason I say treat everyone in this fashion is mainly because this is the way human beings ought to treat each other, and because it will help you form a habit that will bring you amazing and delightful results for the rest of your life. Have you ever noticed that the higher you go in any organization of value, the nicer the people seem to become? You see, the bigger the person, the easier it is to talk to him, to get along with him, and do business with him. Do you know why? It's because he's got a good attitude, and people with the best attitudes just naturally gravitate toward the top. So for 30 days, act toward others and the world at large in exactly the same manner you want the world and others to act toward you. Treat your wife or husband as the person he or she really is, the most important person in your life, and the same with the children. Carry out into the world each morning for 30 days the kind of attitude you would have if you were the most successful human being on earth, and notice how it quickly develops into an habitual attitude. When a person does this, he should realize he has already placed himself on the road to what he seeks. He is right now in the top 5% of the people in this or any other country. He has prepared the ground and planted the seed. He has made of himself a magnet, an embodiment of that which he seeks. The person who takes this attitude should realize that he is using one of the most important secrets of the really great men and women of the world. He will be daily practicing one of the really great rules of life I mentioned in the introductory record, a rule which has made the world's most successful people and has built the world's greatest businesses. Before steel can be cast into a desired shape, the mold, the expectant receptacle, must first be fashioned. Before a building can be erected, the excavation must be made and the foundation laid. And before a human being can achieve the kind of life he wants, he must become the individual. He must think, act, talk, walk, and conduct himself in all of his affairs as would the person he wishes to become. He is then actually that person, and the things that person would have and do will naturally come to him. Almost immediately, a change will be noticed. Irritations that used to frustrate and annoy disappear. When some less informed individual gives you a bad time, stay on the track. When someone cuts in front of you with his car or acts in any other manner that shows his ignorance and lack of courtesy, don't permit yourself to drop to his level. Pity him, for that's what he really deserves. That's the very group a person doesn't want to belong to. And if he acts like them, well, let's face it, he belongs with them. There's nothing in the world that men, women, and children want and need more than the feeling that they're important, that they're needed and respected. They'll give their love, their affection, their respect, and their business to the person who fills this need. So the magic word is attitude. And in summing up, a few points to keep in mind. 1. It is our attitude at the beginning of a task which, more than anything else, will affect its successful outcome. 2. It is our attitude toward life which determines life's attitude toward us. 3. We are interdependent. It is impossible to succeed without others. And it is our attitude toward others which will determine their attitude toward us. 4. The top 5% of the people look successful, act successful, expect success, and are successful. 5. The higher you go in any organization of value, the better will be the attitudes you'll find. 6. Your mind can hold only one thought at a time, and since there's nothing at all to be gained by being negative, be positive. 7. The deepest craving of human beings is to be needed, to feel important, to be appreciated. Give it to them, and they'll return it to you. 8. Look for the best in new ideas. As someone said, I've never met a person I couldn't learn something from. 9. Don't waste valuable time discussing personal problems. It probably won't help you. It cannot help them. 10. Don't talk about your health unless it's good. 11. Radiate the attitude of well-being, of confidence, of a person who knows where he's going. This will inspire those around you, and you'll find good things will begin happening to you. And lastly, for the next 30 days, treat everyone with whom you come in contact as the most important person on earth. If you'll do this for 30 days, you'll do it for the rest of your life. In the next recording, I'll talk to you about greener pastures. But now in closing, remember the words of Walter Dill Scott of Northwestern University. Success or failure in any undertaking is caused more by the mental attitude even than by mental capacities.
It's almost impossible to pick up a daily paper without reading about a person who has achieved some unusual accomplishment. Almost invariably, these stories include the overcoming of what at one time appeared to be virtually insurmountable handicaps. Have you noticed that? A boy whose legs were terribly burned and who seemed destined to a life as a cripple becomes one of the world's outstanding track stars. The poor boy who amasses a fortune. A woman blind and deaf from birth who becomes one of the most inspirational personalities of all time. Every day, a new and dramatic story appears somewhere. Obstacles overcome, outstanding success achieved. They're too numerous to mention. But how and why? These persons do far more than the unhandicapped to overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable and achieve the success they seek. How did it happen? Why? Well, the answer, if fully understood, will bring you and me everything we want, and it's deceptively simple. These people have goals. That is, they fix their mind on a point they have to reach, something that's more important than the effort and time they have to expend in its achievement. A dream seen only in the mind and felt in the heart that's too big to be denied. A dream which rises before their eyes when they awaken in the morning and is the last thing they think about as they drop off to sleep at night. This dream, invisible to all the world except to the person who holds it, is responsible for perhaps every great advance of man. It's the prime cause of much of what we see in the world around us. Everything worthwhile achieved by human beings is a dream come true, a goal achieved. It's been said that what the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. It's the skyscraper, the bridge spanning the bay, landing on the moon. It's the little corner business establishment. It's the lovely home in the suburbs. It's a youngster getting a diploma and the new baby in its mother's arms. It's a low golf handicap and a business position reached. What the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Now, do you know what this means to you and me? Well, let me try to explain. I might add, it took me many years to find this out for myself. Once it's understood, however, life becomes easier, more fun, far more exciting, and incalculably more rewarding. To begin, to understand this subject of goals, we have to realize that it's the very basis of any success. It is, in fact, the very definition of success. The best definition of success I've ever been able to find goes like this. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. If you'll think about it a moment, you'll realize just how good that definition is. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal. It means that any person regularly engaged in achieving something which he or she considers worthy is successful. At the same time, it also means that any person not so engaged must be defined as not successful, a failure, at least temporarily. Any person with a dream in his or her mind and heart, which is pursued as a worthy goal, is successful. The uninformed always seem to equate success with lots of money. While money often accompanies success, it has nothing to do with success, necessarily, unless it happens to be a part of the goal. It's left to each of us to decide for himself what his goal is. With such a simple definition of success, you'd think everyone would be successful. Everyone should be, everyone could be. But it's estimated that only about 5% are. Of all the people you pass on the street, only about 5 out of 100 can tell you what they're working toward. The rest are just going through the movements, drifting along, hoping something good will happen to them, or at least that nothing too bad will, letting circumstances and economic winds blow them this way and that. I like to compare human beings with ships, as Carlyle used to do. It's estimated that about 95% can be compared to ships without rudders. Subject to every shift of wind and tide, they're helplessly adrift. And while they fondly hope that they'll one day drift into a rich and successful port, you and I know that for every narrow harbor entrance there are at least 1,000 miles of rocky coastline. The chances against their drifting into port are 1,000 to 1. But the 5% who have taken the time and exercised the discipline to decide on a destination, to chart a course, sail straight and far across the deep oceans of life, reaching one port after another and accomplishing more in just a few years than all the rest accomplish in a lifetime. If you should visit a ship and ask the captain his next port of call, he'd answer you in one sentence. Even though the captain of a ship cannot see his destination, for fully 99% of his journey he knows what it is, where it is, and that barring an unforeseen and very unlikely catastrophe, he'll reach it if he keeps doing certain things a certain way every day. Every person should do the same thing. Unless you can say it in one concise sentence, what your goal is, well, the chances are good that you've never clearly defined it. When you ask most people what it is they seek, they'll answer in vague, general, non-specific terms. They'll say, I want to be happy, or health, or money. These are not goals. They're simply generalizations desired by everyone. When we tell of goals, let's be specific. What is it you want, you as a person? What is it you would like very much to have or to be or to do, even though you may feel it is, for one reason or another, somewhat beyond your reach at the present time? You see, if you can tell me what you want, I can tell you how to get it, as long as it's worthy of you. Proceeding successfully through a lifetime should be a matter of progressively setting and achieving goals, one after another, each a little better and perhaps more interesting and higher than the preceding. Just as a ship can sail to only one port at a time, set your first port of call. When you reach it, and reach it you will, you can set a new goal, then another. By following this meaningful and common-sense approach to life, you'll be successful and can accomplish more in 5 years than the majority of people do all their lives. Now let me tell you of a way to clarify your thinking and establish your first goal if you don't already have one. Knowing that without a goal we're unsuccessful, but that with a goal we'll have direction and purpose and that our goal will be reached, we begin to realize that establishing a clearly defined goal is one of the most important steps we can possibly take. If you don't know what it is you want more than anything else, in other words, if you're not one of the fortunate who knows exactly what he or she seeks, set some time aside right now. Spend an hour or so, or many hours, even days if necessary, writing down the things you would most like to have. Make a want list. Could include a more beautiful home, a new car, a wanted child, a certain amount of money, a better job, better grades, a particular position in your school or organization, any one of 100 things. Write down as many as you can think of, things you'd like to have, you want. If you're married, it's a good idea to do this with your spouse so that you both get all your ideas down. When you've written down all the things you want, all of them, choose one. That's right, only one that you want more than the others. Write this on a separate sheet or draw a circle around it. Now put the sheet away and forget about all the ideas except the one you've decided to accomplish first. Like a ship, a person can only reach one port at a time. Most of the confusion and indecision suffered by the majority of people is caused by their half-heartedly wanting so many things that they can't decide which to go after first. As a result, they run in circles and often accomplish little or nothing at all. Remember that as a rule, you can achieve only one goal at a time. Once you've decided upon the one goal you first intend to reach, write it on a card to carry with you. Think about it the first thing in the morning and the last thing at night. Think about it as often during the day as you can. By doing this, you'll be forcing your goal into your superconscious mind, from which will come the answers as you need them for its accomplishment. This is the process used by the world's most successful men and women. Think about your goal as often as you can. Get a mental image of it as already having been accomplished. But be sure to be absolutely specific. Do not generalize. If your goal is a certain amount of money, write down the exact amount and the time limit for earning it. If your goal is a beautiful home, get a picture of the exact home, even if you have to pay an architect to draw the plans for you. You might as well, because you're going to achieve it anyway. But be careful on what you set your mind and heart, because if you want it strongly enough, remember, you're going to get it. I spent more than 17 years looking for the so-called secret of success. I wanted to know what element or elements separate the haves from the have-nots, not just in a financial sense, although that's certainly an important part of living, especially these days, but in every sense. I started looking for the answer when I was 12, and I didn't find it until I was 29. All of a sudden, I realized that in the hundreds of lives I'd studied, in the countless books I'd read, a plain and simple fact had been staring me in the face all along, and it is simply that we become what we think about. You see, you are at this moment nothing more than the sum total of your thoughts to this point. Similarly, you'll be next year, 5 years from now, and so on, what you think about from this point onward. That's why establishing a goal is vital to success. Unless we're thinking about the thing we wish to accomplish, our thinking is erratic, confused, jumping first from one thing to another with the result that we accomplish nothing, arrive nowhere, travel in circles. By thinking every morning, every night, and as many times during the day as you can about the single goal we've established for ourselves, we actually begin moving toward it and bringing it toward us. When we concentrate our thinking, it's like taking a river that's turning and twisting and meandering all over the countryside and putting it into a straight, smooth channel. Now it has power, direction, economy, speed. It's the same with our minds. Once we know where we're going, we know why we get out of bed in the morning. We know why we're working, why it's important to do the best work of which we're capable. We know why it's vital that we cut ourselves away from the big, sluggish river of people who are drifting without purpose and cut the channel straight and clear to the number one dream in our heart. Some evening during the rush hour, stand at a busy street corner and watch the passing crowd. Observe how they walk. Look at their faces. Do they seem interested, happy, purposeful, interesting? Or do they seem, for the most part, dull, uninterested, bored? If you watch long enough, you'll see a person with a quick and purposeful step, a good carriage and posture, with interesting, intelligent eyes, who walks as though he or she knows exactly where he or she is going and who's going to insist on getting there. A person with a goal, a dream in his mind or heart. Several billion human beings on Earth would give anything they have for the freedom and personal liberty you and I take for granted every day, to have the right to choose their work and their goals, to enjoy our bountiful standard of living, to know the peace and privacy of our homes, and to have laws which protect the citizen rather than persecute him. We have it all, and yet in the midst of our plenty, millions lead unhappy, aimless lives, living from day to day, month to month, confused, dispirited, in a prison of their own manufacture. These are the people who have never made the decision that could set them free. They've never decided what to do with their lives, even in our climate of freedom, because they don't have the vaguest knowledge that they can accomplish it. As Carlyle said, the man without a purpose is like a ship without a rudder. Have a purpose in life, and having it, throw such strength of mind and muscle into your work as God has given you. He also wrote, a person with a half volition goes backward and forward and makes no way on the smoothest road. A person with a whole volition advances on the roughest and will reach his purpose if there be even a little wisdom in it. Munger once said, there's no road to success but through a clear, strong purpose. Nothing can take its place. A purpose underlies character, culture, position, attainment of every sort. So decide on your goal. Insist upon it. Look at your goal card every morning, every night, as many times during the day as you can. Force your goal into your subconscious mind. See yourself as having attained it. Do this without fail every day, and it will become a habit that will lead you from one success to another all the days of your life. For this is the secret of success, the door to everything you will ever have or be. You are now, and you will become what you think about. In this message, I want to tell you about a plan you can follow which takes only a little time each day, 5 days a week, and which brings results out of all proportion to the time spent. We've covered the fact that no one ever made a purposeful accomplishment without a clear goal toward which to work. I hope you've established one, and that you've begun to think about it frequently every day to impress it into your mind, particularly your remarkable subconscious or superconscious mind. Now for a moment, consider the things your mind has brought you. Everything you have, your work, your relationship with your family and others, your philosophy of life, all come to you as a result of using your mind. Now consider the estimate made by experts. You've probably been operating on less than 10% of your mental capacity, and probably much, much less than that, according to the knowledgeable experts in such fields. In a recent article for the Saturday Review, our old friend Herbert Otto, psychologist, educator, and chairman of the National Center for the Exploration of Human Potential, reminded us that many well-known scientists, such as the late Dr. Maslow, Margaret Mead, Gardner Murphy, O. Spurgeon, English, Carl Rogers, subscribe to the hypothesis that all of us are using just a very small fraction of our capacities. Margaret Mead quotes a 6% figure. Herbert Otto writes, my own estimate is 5% or less. Neurological research has shed new light on man's potential. Work at the UCLA Brain Research Institute points to enormous abilities latent in everyone by suggesting an incredible hypothesis. They've said the ultimate creative capacity of the human brain may be, for all practical purposes, infinite. To use the computer analogy, man is a vast storehouse of data, but we've not learned how to program ourselves, usually, to utilize the data for problem-solving purposes. The following appeared in Soviet Life Today, a USSR English-language magazine. Quote, The latest findings in anthropology, psychology, logic, and physiology show that the potential of the human mind is very great indeed. As soon as modern science gave us some understanding of the structure and work of the human brain, we were struck with its enormous reserve capacity, wrote Yefremov, eminent Soviet scholar and writer. He continues, men and women under average conditions of work and life use only a small part of their thinking equipment. If we were able to force our brain to work at only half its capacity, we could, he said, without any difficulty whatever, learn 40 languages, memorize the large Soviet encyclopedia from cover to cover, and complete the required courses of dozens of colleges. That's if we were able to force our brain to work at only half its capacity. This statement is hardly an exaggeration. It's the generally accepted theoretical view of our mental potentialities. Now, how can we tap this gigantic potential? Well, it's a big and complex problem with many ramifications, but as Herbert Otto pointed out, it's clear that persons who live close to their capacity, who continue to activate their potential, have a pronounced sense of well-being and considerable energy. They see themselves as leading very purposeful and creative lives. The way most people use their minds can be compared to the time back in the early 19th century when just the eastern shore of the North American continent was settled, just a little strip along the coast. To the west stretched the raw, undeveloped great bulk of what was later to become the incredibly rich 99% of the economy, 99% of the natural resources, which resulted in the standard of living enjoyed today by Americans. If everything you have now, think about this. If everything you have is the result of using just 10% of your mind, and probably far less than that, consider for a moment what it will mean to you and your family if you can increase this percentage at all. This cassette will show you how to use infinitely more of your mental powers, how to develop some of that 90% virgin territory. None of us, as a rule, has the slightest notion of the real capabilities of his or her mind. But believe me when I say that your mind can be compared to an undiscovered gold mine, and it makes no difference whether you're 17 or 70. Look at it this way. Your goal is in the future. Your problem is to bridge the gap which exists between where you are now and the goal you intend to reach. Now, this is the problem to solve. Robert Seashore, when chairman of the Department of Psychology at Northwestern University, pointed out that successful people are not people without problems. They're simply people who learn to solve their problems. There you have it. Living successfully, getting the things we want from life, is a matter of solving the problems which stand between where we now are and the point we wish to reach. No one's without problems. They're part of living. But let me show you how much time we waste in worrying about the wrong problems. Here's a reliable estimate of the things people worry about. Things that never happen, 40%. Things over and past that can't be changed by all the worry in the world, 30%. Needless worries about our health, 12%. Petty miscellaneous worries, 10%. Real, legitimate worries, 8%. In short, 92% of the average person's worries take up valuable time, cause painful stress, even mental anguish, and are absolutely unnecessary. And with the real legitimate worries, there are two kinds. There are the problems we can solve, and there are the problems beyond our ability to personally solve. But most of our real problems usually fall into that first group, the ones we can solve if we'll learn how. There must be millions of people today who feel they're being barred from the life they want because they look upon problems not as challenges to be met, but as wide chasms beyond their ability to bridge. A little research proves that successful people have the same kind of problems. One of the very real benefits of working with a psychologist or psychiatrist comes from learning that there are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of other people with problems identical to our own. So the whole thing boils down to a matter not of problems, which are common to us all, but to our ability to solve them. Now, I'm going to assume you've decided on a goal. Your problem is, how do I achieve it? Your goal may be a promotion, a greater income, a beautiful home. It makes little difference what your goal happens to be. For a young person, it could be better grades in school, a diploma, a degree. For a secretary, a trip around the world. For a junior executive, a senior executive position. For the young lady secretary, maybe being president of the company someday, or a brain surgeon. But you have your goal, and you know that you will achieve what you think about. That is, if you stay with it, you will reach your goal. But how? Well, it's right here that the mind comes into play. What is the mind? Nobody knows for sure. Perhaps the best way to describe it is to quote Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Archibald MacLeish. In his play The Secret of Freedom, a character says, "The only thing about a man that is a man is his mind. Everything else you can find in a pig or a horse." That's uncomfortably true. The human mind is the one thing that separates us from the rest of the creatures on this planet. Everything that means anything to us comes to us through our minds. Our love of our families, our beliefs, all of our talents, knowledge, abilities, everything is reflected through our mind. Anything that comes to us in the future will almost certainly come to us as a result of the extent to which we use our minds. And yet it's the last place on earth the average person turns to for help. In order to reflect just a moment on the human mind, consider what it's accomplished. As you do, of course, realize that we're developing so rapidly that we've come further in the realm of progress in the past 50 years than in all the preceding 10,000 years of human civilization. Of all the scientists who ever lived, it's estimated that 90% of them are alive today. We've reached, in the area of ideas and human advancement, a plateau so high it was undreamed of by even the most optimistic forecasters as recently as 30 years ago. But every new idea triggers additional ideas, so that now we're in an era of compounding advancement on every front and in every area that staggers the imagination. From landing on the moon to the great bridges which span our bays and rivers, the harnessing of the power of the sun in our atomic plants and ships, the speed of light computers which in seconds save months and years of calculating drudgery, every man-made thing you see and touch spawned from the most powerful agency in the world, the human mind. Dr. Harlow Shapley of Harvard has said we're entering an entirely new age of mankind. He calls it the psychozoic age, the age of the mind. Now, you own one of those, free and clear. Now let's look at a few facts. The 40-hour week long standard is in imminent likelihood of being even further shortened. This means that the average working person has at his or her disposal an enormous amount of free time. In fact, if you total the hours in a year, subtract the sleeping hours, if you sleep 8 hours every night, you'll find that the person has almost 6,000 waking hours, of which less than 2,000 are spent on the job. Now this leaves 4,000 hours a year when we're neither working or sleeping. These might be called discretionary hours, with which, well, we can do pretty much as we want. Now, so you can see the amazing results in your life, I want to recommend that you take just 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, and devote this hour to exercising your mind. Pick 1 hour a day on which you can be fairly certain. The best time for me is an hour before the others are up in the morning. The mind is clear, the house is quiet, and if you like, with a fresh cup of coffee, this is the time to start the mind going, and here's one good way to do it. During this hour, every morning or at night, whatever your favorite time is, take a completely blank sheet of paper. At the top of the page, write your present primary goal clearly, simply. They say that a problem defined is half solved. Then, since our future depends upon the way in which we handle our work, write down as many ideas as you can for improving that which you now do. Try to think of 20 possible ways in which the activity that fills your day can be improved. You won't always get 20, but even one idea is pretty good. Now remember, 2 important points with regard to this. 1, this is not easy. And 2, most of your ideas won't be any good. Now, when I say it's not easy, I mean it's like starting any new habit. At first, you'll find your mind a little reluctant to be hauled up and out of the old familiar rut. But as you think about your work and ways in which it might be improved, write down every idea that pops into your head, no matter how absurd it might seem. Now, let me tell you what'll happen. Some of your ideas will be good and worth testing. The most important thing this extra hour accomplishes, however, is that it deeply embeds your goal into your subconscious, or what we like to call the superconscious mind. Starts the whole vital machinery working, first thing every morning. And 20 ideas a day, if you can come up with that many. Total 100 a week, even if you don't think on weekends. An hour a day, 5 days a week, totals 260 hours a year. That still leaves you 3,740 hours of free leisure time. Now, this means you'll be thinking about your goal and ways of improving your performance, increasing your service, 6.5 full extra working weeks a year. 6.5 40-hour weeks devoted to thinking and planning. Can you see how easy it is to rise above the so-called competition? And it will still leave you with 15 hours a day to spend as you please. Starting each day thinking, you'll find that your mind will continue to work all day long. You'll find that at odd moments when you least expect it, really great ideas will begin to pop into your mind. Now, whenever they do, write them down as soon as you can. Just one great idea can completely revolutionize your work and, as a result, your life. If you want to develop the muscles of your body, you take daily exercise of some sort. The mind is developed in exactly the same way, except that the returns are out of all conceivable proportion to the time and energy spent. The mind of man can lift anything. His muscles, even the best developed, are puny alongside some of those of the dumbest animals on earth. If man had depended on his muscles for survival, he probably would have disappeared, as did the dinosaurs, which were incidentally the most physically powerful creatures that ever lived. Let me give you just some of the results people have reported to me as a consequence of following this 1 hour a day routine. An office equipment salesman sold more of his company's product in 1 month than he had formerly sold in an entire year during the 4 years he'd been with his company. A Sunday school teacher with 5 pupils set a goal of 30 pupils. Her last letter told us she now has a class of 25. She's almost reached her goal. I've used this system for years, and it's given me some of the most gratifying and rewarding experiences of my life. And it costs 5 hours a week. 5 hours out of 168. Is it worth it? I'll say it is. It's like spending 5 hours a week digging in a solid vein of pure gold, because your mind is all of that and much more. Each time you write your goal at the top of the sheet of paper, don't worry or become concerned about it. Think of it only as waiting to be reached, a problem only waiting to be solved. Face it with faith, and bend all the great powers of your mind towards solving it, and believe me, solve it you will. You know, this puts each of us in the driver's seat. Let me briefly recap. 1. This week, start spending 1 hour each day getting as many ideas as you can. Try for 20 a day on ways to improve what you're now doing. Remember, the achievement of your goal very likely depends upon it, as does your whole future. Once you start exercising your mind in this way, I know you'll want to continue the practice. It's fun. 2, if everything you now have is the result of using, say, 5 to 10% of your mental ability, you can imagine what life will be like if you can increase this figure to 20% or more. 3, successful people are not people without problems. They're simply people who learn to solve their problems. 4, don't waste time and energy worrying about needless things. Remember that 40% of them will never happen, 30% have already happened and can't be changed, 12% are needless worries about health, 10% are petty, miscellaneous worries, and only 8% are real. Try to separate the real from the unnecessary and solve those which are within your ability to solve. 5, the human race has advanced farther during the past 50 years than in all the preceding 10,000 years of human civilization. We're now living right in the middle of the golden age man's been dreaming of and praying for centuries, and it's very likely going to get better. Last of all, the only thing in the world that can take you to your goals in life is your mind, its effective use, and following through on the good ideas it supplies you. Each of us has a tendency to underestimate his or her own abilities. We should realize that we have deep within ourselves a reservoir of great ability, even genius, that can be tapped if we'll just dig deep enough. It's called the miracle of your mind.